Thank you so much for coming. Good evening. My name is Taylor Chang. It's my honor to serve as a Director of Public Programs here at Bishop Museum. And we're going to be speaking and being in a conversation with the masterminds behind our newest exhibition, EXPLORE EXCORE. We are extremely excited to be able to host this celebration of the exhibition that recently opened, and it's going to be up until, I believe, March of next year. So there will be a lot of opportunities to see it, and please spread the word. But today we're going to talk about really kind of the genesis of the exhibition and kind of go into a deep dive into the incredible research and the technology and the work that's being done through EXCORE, which not that many people realize is run and operated through the Bishop Museum. So I'm going to introduce our panelists and our co-curators and exhibition designer behind EXPLORE EXCORE before we dive into it. To my immediate left here is Richard Pyle, Dr. Richard Pyle. He is our senior curator of ichthyology here at Bishop Museum. He's also the director of EXCORE, which is the Center of the Exploration of Coral Reef Ecosystems, EXCORE. Also just an incredible pioneer. I don't know if how many of you are familiar with his work, but he has been a pioneer in underwater diving and technology and research for many years. And likewise, to his left is Brian Greene, cinematographer, scholar, explorer, has an awesome following of people who have admired his work for a very long time. He is also the diving safety officer for EXCORE. He's the ichthyology research specialist, his work is front and center in the exhibition if you haven't already seen it. And last but very much not least, back to epically, I want to introduce DeAnne Kennedy, a Bishop Museum exhibition designer, the artist and creative behind the exhibition, and in terms of how it's organized, how it's displayed, the beauty of it. I just want to put my hats off to DeAnne Kennedy here. So please join me in welcoming our esteemed panelists, and just mahalo nui for all that you do. So I'm just going to kick off our conversation by asking kind of a basic question about EXCORE for those who aren't already familiar with what EXCORE is. And maybe anybody can take a swing at answering this, but if you could describe, just briefly, what is EXCORE, and what is it? Why is it imperative to explore and to understand and to research coral reefs? And when we say exploring coral reefs, like what is the scale of that? And what are the different types of habitats that you're exploring through EXCORE?
I'll start and then I'll turn it over. So I'll do the big picture biodiversity part. So one of the key messages we hope this exhibit, conveys, and that we always try to convey through our writings and opportunities such as this, is the fundamental value of biodiversity to all of us. Not just to all of us, but to the entire future of humanity. Now, I'm sure that sounds very pithy and, yes, that's the appropriate thing to say, but I don't think people quite understand the magnitude of the value that biodiversity has for us. So, for example, all of the oxygen you're breathing comes from biodiversity, right? All of the food you eat comes from biodiversity, right? Not just directly the stuff you put in your mouth, but all the pollinators and all the microorganisms that allow crops to grow. So much stuff biodiversity does for us. How long are we going to live without oxygen? How long are we going to live without food? All right, not very long. So those are just two examples. Some other examples. Half of all new medicines come from biodiversity. So the cures to cancer and AIDS and all kinds of things like that are being discovered in the biomolecules of organisms that live out there in nature. Biodiversity sequesters 250 billion tons of carbon every single year. All right, and then on top of that, just to sum it all up, the estimate is that biodiversity provides to the global economy somewhere between $150 and $170 trillion. That's more than the entire monetary GDP. In other words, biodiversity serves our economy more than every currency on the planet does combined, which is kind of astonishing. That's what we try to convey here with this exhibit and with what we talk about, is how biodiversity is utterly fundamental to the survival of humanity, and that's what we're about. So why don't I turn it over to you to say how EXCORE associates with biodiversity.
Right. So a little background here. So going back to even the founding of this museum, some of the first fish specimens ever collected in the Pacific by a major expedition ended up here in the museum. The first specimens actually housed here. So we have this over 130-year legacy of exploring the Pacific and recording, documenting, and sharing the biodiversity of the Pacific. And luckily, Rich and I, our advisor, he spent most of his career here, and he noticed some nerdy tendencies in some little kids who were trying to catch fish, and kind of, kept the dream alive and brought us into his circle. Rich started working here when he was, what?
Well, actually 13, I started
13,
volunteering.
Right. I met Jack in our office over there when I was 15.
I should mention, he's talking about a guy named Jack Randall.
Sorry. Right, so Jack Randall, our mentor, he spent most of his career here at Bishop Museum. He was the most prolific ichthyologist in all of history. He found 839 species of coral reef fishes that are still valid to this day. So most of the coral reef fish that you see on the coral reef out anywhere, not just Hawaii, he found for the first time because he was one of the very first diving scientists, like Cousteau era. He was the first person to take a camera underwater. He was the first person to discover whole new fields. He basically developed the fields of marine biology that people study today. And that the idea of taking this over 130-year legacy of exploration at Bishop Museum through the lens of Jack and then pushing that forward into the future is what EXCORE is all about. And not just that, we have many more tools than Jack ever had at his disposal. So we're combining ROVs, AUVs, submarines, eDNA, any current technology that can help us explore biodiversity is what EXCORE is about.
So I guess what I would say in summary is what I talked about biodiversity and what Brian just talked about of sort of the origins of the EXCORE is that EXCORE is about using whatever the latest technology is, whether that's steamships in the 19th century, scuba in the 1940s, closed-circuit mixed-gas rebreathers, which he and I pioneered in sort of the 80s and 90s. Whatever that technology is, the world's most sophisticated underwater cameras, which are emphasized there. Whatever the latest technology is that allows us to document biodiversity on coral reef habitats, that's what EXCORE does. And more broadly, Bishop Museum does that across all habitats here in Hawaii and throughout the Pacific. But this exhibit and our focus is on a particular slice of that biodiversity on coral reefs.
Yeah, and not only that, but he mentioned the high-tech cameras. My current camera system inside, I'll show you guys later, is the same system they filmed the latest Superman movie with, but with a better lens. and the point of this exhibit is it's really hard for us to share the science and all the nerdy specimen stuff that we do in the fish collection, which is right over there. This is a way for us to show you guys what we experience and what we're trying to capture into perpetuity. Like my 4-year-old son is right here, Lucas. I want him to see coral reefs the way we grew up on coral reefs, and instead of just collecting specimens, we're collecting an archive of imagery that can inform the future of what coral reefs used to look like if we don't solve the problem. And this is the best way that we can show that is this exhibit.
Beautifully said. And DeAnne, I wanted to ask, given all of that history and all of that grand scale, how did you approach taking that and transforming it into an exhibition? And are there certain key features in the exhibition that you would want people to pay particular attention to?
Yeah, so I work with these guys. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you do what? And they get into the nerdy and I get to ask all these questions. And I'm like, so rebreathers mean you're mixing what with what, under what pressure? And I just ask all these questions because I feel like my role is to see what they're doing, learn about it so that I can then help communicate the information to other visitors who are coming at it with as little information about it as I have, or hopefully more, and then do an honest job of presenting the information with these gentlemen. But then I'm like, Brian, how are you at the right place at the right time with the camera that you have to document this? And he's like, that's the whole point. That's the whole point, is we need to be there. We need to go out. We need to do this. We need to document. This is the whole point of EXCORE. And then talking with these two gentlemen, I was like, well, then let's do an exhibit. Let's really showcase it so our community understands that here at this museum, here amongst this community, this work is being done for everyone to see and to understand what we have going on in our world now, but also learning about the history of it all and where it all comes from. Just literally earlier this week, finding out that we have some photography and some film that we want to try and figure out how to digitize, so we can have what was recorded previously digital, so that way we can continue to bring it into the future. I'm like, they're just on the other side of the building from me, guys. Like, I'm an artist. It's so incredible to be able to like work with these guys and highlight what they do. So that's essentially
Likewise.
So that's essentially my job, as I get to see and learn from a place of not knowing, which is really exciting, and being able to then hopefully share that in a way that our visitors can also feel like they're understanding well. Yeah.
So in the exhibition itself, it's sort of organized in a particular way. There are certain types of footage that's being highlighted on the different walls. Can any one of you sort of share a little bit of that kind of that approach to highlighting the different types of footage and cinematography that you're collecting?
Okay. All right. Well, so if you've been in the exhibit, and I'm assuming most of you have, and if you haven't yet, I'm sure you soon will. There are 3 large projected images on the screen. And when you first step in there, the sense you get is, oh my gosh, I'm underwater. And that's all credit to DeAnne. That was her vision. It's like, I want people to walk in that room and feel like they're underwater. I don't want them to be confronted with all this information. I just want them to sort of absorb and be in the environment. And then we thought, well, if we have 3 screens, should we just put random stuff on the 3 screens, or should we have a theme to each one? And so there is a theme to each one, but honestly, I forget it when I go in there because I'm just so mesmerized by all of it. But as you're standing there and you first walk in the room, the screen on your left emphasizes what we call macro photography, which is using a certain kind of lens that allows you to get very close to little tiny things. So on that screen, you'll see an example of little tiny itty bitty things blown up, 8, 10 feet tall on this big screen. And then on its opposite wall, the right side, is what we emphasize wide-angle photography. So if you're a photographer, you understand wide-angle lenses. Those are lenses that can capture large vistas, big, huge animals, big reefscapes, things like that. And then the one in the middle is sort of a combination of both. But it's a celebration, it's intended anyway, as a celebration of biodiversity. It's just a mishmash of not only all kinds of different organisms, big ones and small ones mixed together, but also the people who study and document and devote their lives to understanding it. So those are the 3 basic themes of the 2 large videos.
Right. I just want to say the reason I defer to Rich on that is because I'm just now seeing the exhibit for the first time. Until 18 hours ago, I was in Fiji for the past month. And this whole process of building this thing, I missed it because Rich and I have done 5 expeditions since January. She did most of the work. It's amazing. I'm nerdy on the video stuff, but this is beautiful. But so I forget what the themes are because I'm seeing it for the first time.
But you're on the grounds, and you're the one who's, that you're capturing this beautiful art, really, in a lot of ways. And I kind of want to ask a question that speaks to that.
Yeah.
So in the center of the exhibition, you'll see sort of a highlighted display of the evolution of camera technology. And I guess maybe I'll ask Brian this question first. Can you speak a little bit to the evolution of camera technology and how it informs the science research and how they inspire each other in a way?
Right. So Rich and I, we've been using cameras, and our advisor our advisor Jack Randall here at the Bishop Museum, he was taking cameras underwater in the 50s, right? So we kind of see that as always a necessary tool for what we do. I've always wanted to share what I see underwater with everybody I encounter. Even as a little kid. So I grew up at Kwajalein Atoll in the Republic of the Marshall Islands. I grew up on the world's largest coral atoll. There wasn't a whole lot to do except spend all your time underwater. And I lucked out. My dad was a diver. He gave me my first legit camera system when I was 15 years old. And over the years, we've used the latest camera technology on every expedition we've been on, but we've gotten to the point where we've started moving more into literally Hollywood level cinema cameras because they give us the resolution that we need to document these things at the highest level available right now. And as a byproduct of that, the footage, I mean, it takes training and skill and all that stuff, but the footage is cinema quality. Like 3 days ago, I was diving in Voli Voli, the north side of, in the Bly Waters, north of Fiji, and I sent him some footage, and I said, this is straight from camera to IMAX. Like, this is incredible stuff that we're using in a different way. Like, we're not trying to necessarily make documentaries or films. We could do that, but what we're trying to do is capture the best quality of what we can capture of coral reefs right now.
So yeah, that case you see in there is actually the evolution of the technology that's used. Every one of those cameras was the cutting edge technology of its day. Starting at one end with this big blue aluminum housing, which in the 1960s was like everyone lusted over that thing to put their Nikon F1 camera in there. And as the technology moved along, we'd spend thousands of dollars on whatever the latest and greatest was, and then 5 years later, it's like, all right, now the latest technology, we got to find $5,000 more to buy the latest technology. And you don't throw away your last $5,000 camera. So that's how we ended up with all these old cameras sitting in boxes in our garage and stuff. We thought, hey, these belong in a museum. And now here they are in a museum, which is nice. But one of the points I wanted to make is that camera goes up to 4K video, and the very last, smallest camera you see in there is the same model of camera that I still use today. But there are 2 generations beyond that not in the case. The one he's using now isn't the next generation beyond that, it's 2 generations beyond that. It's shooting video in 8K, which isn't twice as big as 4K, it's 4 times bigger, 8 times, yeah. So, but what I wanted to tell you something was those projectors showing the images are only showing you them in HD 720, which is the low resolution version of HD. So they're only showing you something like 1/20th of the actual information that's in those videos. We're limited. Even if we had fancy projectors, you don't have a wall that's painted purely enough to actually capture the resolution of these images. These images are so high resolution, there's no monitor that can display them adequately. So why shoot in such high resolution? Well, first of all, 100 years from now, everyone's going to have that on their wristwatch, right? And so we're future-proofing the images. Right. But also, it allows scientists to zoom in and see tiny little details in these images that you couldn't with a regular image. So that's why we need to be the absolute cutting-edge technology.
Right. Yeah, and so part of the reason we call it the art of underwater science is we're taking these images and hopefully utilizing them the same way that we would with a museum specimen. So these are cataloged, they have all of the data, including like when we shot it, where we were, the depth, the temperature. Like these are records of points in space and time that we can use the same way a museum specimen is treated. And I don't know of anybody else doing that, like using these Hollywood level cameras anywhere else. Like this is a EXCORE Bishop Museum thing right now.
So you kind of touched upon maybe a next question, which is, can you each sort of explain in your own words and your own approach to this exhibition what the relationship between art and science is for you? And maybe I'll start with DeAnne first, and we can go down the line.
So to kind of go back to it is like knowing what is happening, knowing what these gentlemen are doing and what they're able to capture, wanting to essentially create an environment where people are walking in and they are getting to see just the magnificence of it. You know, how can we create a space where you're just kind of, you walk in, just this morning, this group of young kids walked in and this one kid was like, whoa, it's so cool here. And I was like, that's the point. So being able to like, I'm like talking with these guys, I'm like, I know what these guys are creating, what they have, and seeing what can we do in order to show this, what environment can we create. Like we have different doorways that have light spilling in. How can we prevent light spillage so that the projections can project as bright as they need to be? So the artistic, they're creating stunning works of art through film, And my job is to try and help show that in a gallery space. And so like choosing the color that we're painting the walls, choosing the color of the surface that we're projecting onto, getting the best projectors that we have available at the museum in order to do as good as we possibly can, and then trying to create the right environment so that way, you know, you have seats and you can see, but you're not standing in the projection cones. It's a whole situation where I get to kind of highlight what these guys are doing and create the space for it.
So I like to think of it, I mean, so for context, when Brian and I do these dives, we are fish nerds to the core, right? That is our mission. We want to understand and document these fishes where they live. Now, of course, coral reefs have a lot more kinds of organisms on them than fishes, which are always in the background of these images. So we're actually collecting much more than images about fishes. But the thing that DeAnne sort of opened my eyes to when we first started talking about this exhibit was, even though we're looking at these video clips like data points, like Brian was just describing, like museum points in time, we often like to tell people that the people we're shooting these videos for haven't been born yet. Not just our kids, not just our grandkids, but people who are going to be born 50 years from now, 100 years from now, who will live in a very different world from what we live in now, may not have the luxury of seeing these in real life. We're trying to document what these things look like now so that they will at least know what once existed on this planet. And it was DeAnne who kind of opened my eyes to this stuff that we are doing for our nerd purposes has an aesthetic appeal. And the light bulb went off. It's like, well, if you're going to if you're going to motivate people, you have to inspire them. And these spectacularly visually amazing images, which we capture for scientific data, have the dual purpose of also inspiring people to understand why biodiversity matters and how beautiful it is. So that's why I like the idea of it's the art of underwater science.
Well, it's like a documentary with context in that way. So our advisor, I mentioned him, Dr. Jack Randall, he had all these old 16 millimeter, 8 millimeter film reels that are in a freezer in our fish collection.
There's actually one Calder has that on the table back there. Yeah.
So like these are records of coral reefs in the Caribbean that like from the late 50s, and they're in color. And he and I saw these videos, and no coral reef in the entire Atlantic Ocean exists that looks like what he filmed in the 50s. And that's kind of like what we're trying to do here is like conservation and saving the coral reefs is the most important thing. We need to figure all that stuff out. But our role as nerds and scientists specifically is to document what we can while we can, and hope that the conservation efforts work.
Yeah.
Brian, can you talk a little bit about your process and when you go out on your dives and you're strategically positioning yourself to be at the right place at the right time? Like, how do you approach, what is your approach when you do that, when you go on your dives and you're trying to, is it, how much does chance and luck factor into it? And how much does real intense planning, pre-preparation go into it as well?
Well, I mean, there's always chance and luck, but Rich and I have been doing this for so long. Like, I started snorkeling when I was 3 years old at Kwajalein Atoll. I started diving when I was 8. He started, you were diving in Pyle when you were 12. Like, we've been doing this our whole lives as literally fish nerds in the Western Pacific. Like, way more species of fish than Hawaii has. So we've been kind of accumulating this knowledge over years, and we both kind of have a photographic memory for fishes. And there's the process is intense. Like, the field and expedition takes weeks and months of planning, lots of money, lots of equipment, and depending on where you're going in the Pacific, the logistics are more difficult than other places. But we've always wanted to just find the coolest fish. Like, that's always been our motivation. Like, when I was in high school at Kwajalein, like, I had a group of guys that I would dive with, and it was a competition who could find the rarest species of fish. And that's kind of how I got associated with Bishop Museum, is that we had this little game between, like, this guy was going to go snorkel over here, I was going to go snorkel over here, and see who caught the coolest fish. And eventually I found one that wasn't in any book. And that's how I got looped in with Dr. Johnny Randall here at the Bishop Museum, and in turn with this guy. And for 30 years, we've just been nonstop doing this. Like, we've done expeditions to most island groups in the Pacific. We found well over 100 new species of fish. So, some of our expeditions, we count over 12 new species per hour on the bottom. and we want to make sure that we can share that with people. We don't want that knowledge getting lost in data on a computer somewhere. We want it displayed or on TV, or like show people the beauty of the stuff that we see that they can't access.
So you mentioned Jack Randall a few times, your mentors, and really built the foundations of the ichthyology collection at Bishop Museum, among many other things. Can you share a little bit more about maybe the most important lessons that you learned from Jack Randall and how those lessons inform your work today?
I'm gonna let him start.
Okay. Yeah. Wow, that's hard. I was working alongside him for almost 20 years, over 20 years, actually. 36 years. Yeah. So anyway, he was a massive influence on my life. There's no way I could pinpoint one lesson learned from him. But I guess it's more of a sense for how one is a simultaneously good scientist and decent human being. So one of the things about him is, as Brian mentioned sort of in passing, but this is actually objectively true, he was the greatest ichthyologist in all of history. And there's about 8 or 10 metrics, objective metrics, that'll back up that statement. Yet he was one of the funniest, warmest, friendliest, welcomingest people I've ever known. If you'd ever met him, you would never know he was the greatest anything in the world. And to be the greatest fish nerd in the world and being a young fish nerd around him, seeing how humble he was and how generous he was with his time and his insights, that's tried to inform me and shape me to try to be the same way to others.
Likewise, like I met Jack in our fish collection over here when I was 15 years old, and it was like instant connection. It was like he was the grandfather I'd never really had, even though I had a grandfather. But he took us under his wing, and Rich did many expeditions with him all around the Pacific. I took him on his very last expedition to the Marshall Islands when I was 25, he was 85. And I was having a hard time keeping up with him. And we found like 12 new species of fish. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to put in the words. But I would hope that he would approve of this exhibit, because a lot of what we're trying to showcase is not just what we do, but the legacy of what he did. And he's featured in there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of those cameras are his. And
I should mention, by the way, his daughter still works with us in the fish collection. His granddaughter is here tonight. So his legacy continues to live on, and that's a big part of what this exhibit's about. EXCORE is not just about the Rich and Brian show doing the Rich and Brian thing. There's an entire legacy here that literally goes back to the beginning of Bishop Museum and encompasses Jack Randall's career here as well. And that's part of our mission, is to make sure that legacy lives on, and that's what we devote our lives to doing.
DeAnne, in the exhibition, that especially from looking at how it expresses the history of EXCORE, what are the moments within the history of EXCORE that you gravitated to as a designer of the exhibition that you thought was important to highlight?
That's a good question. One of the things that I actually found really fun for me is getting to get all of the cameras together. So back in our exhibit department building, we put these 2 tables together to get something long enough that was the same size as the case that we're going to use. And having these guys, I mean, so they're fish nerds, but they're also camera nerds, and they're also this nerds, and they're also that nerds. And so, you show up
always
and you're
nerds, though.
It's fantastic. And so they're like popping things apart and putting things together, and here's something that's like 60 years old, and they're like, no, you have to do the screw right on the side because that's how we had to jerry-rig it for this thing. So like seeing how like the development of the cameras and the camera housings, or the camera that is its own housing versus the one that, apparently the aluminum is cast so it weeps water inside, and just knowing that there's a whole additional level of knowledge that these guys had to learn and gather from other people in order to do the underwater filming and work that they do in order to get to the point where they are now. So kind of in the history of that, I really love having all the cameras in the case in the middle of the room as a timeline of what has happened. yeah, just being in the room and they're like popping things in and out. I'm like, I don't even know what's happening right now. Wait, does that go with that one? And they're like, no, that one goes to that one over there. It was pretty fantastic, actually.
I want to add a quick anecdote that's a little Easter egg inside the exhibit. So one of the cameras, she mentioned really briefly, you may not have picked this up, that one of those cameras is made out of cast aluminum. And it's made by a company, I shouldn't mention the name of the company. It's on the camera itself. It's America. It's Amphibico. But anyway, at the time, it was the latest, greatest in underwater camera making technology. And the thing that excited me was that this particular housing was rated to 330 feet deep, which is how deep I was going with rebreathers back in the time. And the other camera housings were only rated to 250 feet. I later found out they were only rated to 250 feet because that's the deepest their chamber could go. They were actually built to go to 500 feet. But anyway, I bought this one because it was supposed to go to 330 feet. Apparently, I was the first one to ever use it to those depths because whenever I was below 280 feet, I would have like a spoonful of seawater inside the camera at the end of the dive. And I thought, oh, my O-rings are nicked or something, replace something. Nope, never was that. And what I later found out is that the aluminum, the water at those pressures actually seeps through the aluminum and forms as water droplets on the inside of the housing. So it's not really rated to that depth because it's not really waterproof to that depth. And the reason I bring this up is the little placard that talks about that particular camera is the one example of a photograph. You see photographs of all those cameras in use, you'll see me spraying it down with a hose, trying to rinse it out after it had seawater inside, after one of these dives where I discovered that the water weeps through the aluminum into the housing.
So, DeAnne, what you just spoke to is actually kind of really important and super fascinating about the nature of the work that you both do, where the level of innovation and sort of on the spot problem solving that you're doing with this technology and you're inventing in real time. It's not like, so can you talk a little bit about that, like how when a new technology comes out, how then do you use that technology and adapt it, and then like how did you learn those skill sets to be able to like basically jerry-rig and to kind of build your own cameras based off of your research needs?
Well, I want to go back to, you asked earlier, like, what did Jack Randall teach me?
Yeah.
It was to never stop being a nerd, basically. It was like, we are nonstop. Like, this guy was the pioneer of deep diving. Like there was nobody doing the kind of diving he started doing. Mixed gas, open circuit mixed gas, trimix deep diving, to the point where the cave dive world and the shipwreck world, like they didn't know what he was doing. Like they were learning from him, and that was like 35 years ago, almost 40 years ago. That's how old we are. But like we've always been on the cutting edge of technology out of necessity. Like the thing Jack taught us was, well, he found most of the coral reef fish on the shallow reefs, and he's like, if you want to find something new, you got to go deeper. And we had to figure out how to do that. Like, there was no technology that could allow us to do that. Like, when he first started diving rebreathers, the only way you could get one was to be in the military. There were no commercially available rebreathers on planet Earth. So we've had to work with companies and good friends of ours, very smart, much smarter nerds than we are, to develop this kind of technology, like from NASA technology. And we still work with those guys to make the robots and all this stuff. So we've always had to push the technology because we're just nonstop curious nerds, and we need... Like, we'll find something, and we're like, oh, what about this, and what about this? So we're nonstop. Like, that is really, like, I would say it's the life force behind EXCORE.
Can I really quick? Is
Please,
also, again, the things that I get to find out that these gentlemen are doing, they're doing mixed gas diving, but they're also, because trying to figure out how to use technology in a new way that's never been done before, these gentlemen are also diving along with submersibles. So it's how can we, because a submersible can only do so much and a diver can only do so much, but if you take both of them down in the water together, the other things that you're capable of doing by mixing different types of technology that doesn't necessarily get done. And so like getting to see the submersibles, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like, you guys get to do the coolest stuff.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, the different types of technology that you really have to be on top of, both the diving technology and the camera technology, and what's the relationship between the two? And do these companies love you or hate you because you're pushing them, beyond their limits and boundaries? Yeah.
I think they love us. I mean, we've both been integral in development of multiple rebreathers and the camera system. There's some footage from my latest camera system displayed in there, but I also have the camera system in the back room set up. I can show anybody, but that was basically conceived of in November of last year, And Gates Underwater Housing has put this 150 meter rated Hollywood level camera, and there's nothing else like it on planet Earth. By March, he and I were taking it to the Philippines, and like I tested it once in Hawaii, and then my first real dive with this thing was in the Philippines. Like we are always just like going.
You forgot to mention what happened on that first test dive.
Oh, it leaked.
It had water
Yeah,
inside.
it had water inside. But it was my fault.
Oops.
Yeah, my fault. Yeah.
Do you find certain trends in what comes first? Is it the diving technology they have to push, or is it the camera technology, or how does that? How
I mean,
at the same
they
time?
go hand in hand. We're still working on to develop newer rebreathers that can, allow us to go a little bit deeper and stay a little longer safely. And then we need a new camera, right, to do it. So like, it's all related. It's all one thing.
What's the most exciting technological evolution that's happening right now, in your opinion, or that you're excited to, really pioneer yet again?
All right, I'll start on that. So we've been using these closed-circuit rebreathers. Now, if you don't know what a closed-circuit rebreather is, it was actually invented in the 1870s, long before scuba was. It's very old technology. But people who used them kept dying over and over and over again. And so they were sort of abandoned for a long time, and then scuba came around in the 1940s, and that was cheap and easy and became popular. Well, rebreathers had sort of a renaissance, and starting in the 1980s and through the 1990s, and it all boils down to electronics technology. Because there were more sophisticated, back then you needed a whole mainframe, right? Just to write Microsoft Word or something, right? So technology has gotten better and better and better and smaller and smaller and smaller and more reliable. And that's what enabled rebreathers to work and allow us to stay alive. Now, specifically, that technology is being able to monitor how much oxygen you're breathing. That's really the number one thing you have to pay attention to. I won't go into all the details, but basically, the reason people used to die with rebreathers a lot is because they were either breathing too much oxygen or too little oxygen. Both of them can be fatal underwater. And so you need to know exactly how much oxygen's in there. And coming back to your original question, to me, the most exciting recent technology that we've begun using are these brand new solid-state oxygen sensors, which sound kind of boring, but they fundamentally transform the way that we can do our dives. Instead of us always being skeptical of the equipment, we now have 10 years of using these things where they are rock solid reliable. And so the next evolution of that is essentially boils down to trying to have two of those rebreathers on our back at the same time. But I'll leave that to you.
Yeah. I mean, so we never stop with this stuff. Like we never take a break. Like that's one of the things Jack taught me. But one of the things that DeAnne mentioned earlier is this concept we came up with years ago called synergy. And that's basically using a submarine underwater as a helicopter. So we jump on the side of it. We put all the bailout systems we need in case we have a rebreather failure. Submarine takes us down to 150 meters. We hop off, and then we have the submarine hover above us, lighting us. We can do our science and filming. If we have a problem, everything we need is back on the submarine, and then it brings us back to the surface. I mean, with many hours of decompression. But like this is and then we went. With this idea, we're combining autonomous underwater vehicles that can follow us around and track our life support equipment and beam that to the surface, and ROVs coming down. We were in Rapa Nui in January, and we were scouting the dive sites with an ROV. We put it over the side. It would go spend however long until we found a really good spot, and then we would go straight down the tether right to the good spot. Instead of wasting valuable hours, literally, we've done dives like I have a very burned into my brain dive at French Frigate Shoals up in the Northwestern Islands with Dan Wagner was on that dive with me, where we dropped down to 100 meters into a sand field that was supposed to be a coral reef. You still have to do 3.5 hours of decompression. So we're trying to combine all these technologies just to make it more efficient and better, really. And we have, the exhibit, the new cameras, the new rebreathers, we're not going to stop.
One of the things I want to mention is, I don't know if you've heard how many trips they just mentioned that they did in the past year. We've been working on this exhibit for the past year, and then they keep leaving. But the exciting part is that they're always out doing the science. That's the difference, is that they're not just sitting at their desks all the time doing data logging, but they're always out there getting more information, going to new places, recording things, getting new cameras. But it's a challenge, but it's probably a good challenge to have.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's even more mind-blowing. I mean, so before we go to the future-facing questions, I just want to do. I have a question about, when you look back at the history of EXCORE, what were some of the most consequential, most memorable moments for you personally, and maybe, just scientifically also? Like, what were some of the most biggest historical moments within the history of EXCORE that is just like changed the course of the research, impacted the field?
I'll start that one, and then Rich can finish this one.
Yeah.
So we always had this idea of like making something, and a lot of that came from our buddy Josh Kopis, who formerly from the museum passed away. And we were in Pyle in 2019? 19. And we did a bunch of really deep dives, and we found some really cool new species of fish. And we were like, wow, maybe we should put a name on this idea. Like, we've hashed this idea back and forth for many years about creating a specific department at Bishop Museum that focuses on what Jack did and what we do. And, like, if we can put a name on it and make it an entity, we can push it forward. That was the whole idea. Yeah. And I remember the specific boat ride back from, I don't know if it was Turtle Canyons or so. It was somewhere down in the Rock Islands of Pyle. And I remember this like sunset boat ride back, and Josh and Rich and I were like the Rock Islands all around us, and somebody was like, "Let's call it EXCORE." And I was like, "That sounds pretty extreme, but let's do it."
Yeah. No, I mean, I remember that day very well. So I guess to give that a little context, I always try to say the spirit of EXCORE has been around since literally the first day of Bishop Museum. This idea of using the latest technology to explore, ocean ecosystems. Back then it was steamships. Now it's rebreathers and robots and cameras. But it was Josh really who encouraged Brian and I to think, concretely about, we're happy just working our little windowless office, doing our little fish nerd thing, and Josh is like, if you just told everybody what you did, they might find it interesting enough, and maybe it would be easier to get funding to do. And I think it was his idea to sort of create this entity within Bishop Museum, which is now, EXCORE. And so the name, that was 2019, that was 6 years ago. But the idea has been kind of evolving all along. And one of the things that, and I know this doesn't exactly answer your question, but I think it's fundamental to EXCORE, which is that a lot of times today, people are so wanting to do it fast and quick and be the first and all of that sort of stuff. Brian and I have taken a much more, careful approach. We want to build this rock-solid foundation. Like 10 years ago, when we came up with the first original inkling of this, or that name, in 2019, we could have started beating up on, funders and saying, give us money, we need to do this, it's really not. And we decided, no, we need to make sure we understand what we are, what our mission is, what we're going to do. And I think the opening of this exhibit is sort of like just in the last 18 months is when we finally started telling the world, we think we have a pretty good idea of what our mission is. And we want to share that with everybody. And I know that's not the question you asked, but what Brian said sort of reminded me that this is an idea that's been around the museum since the very beginning. It gelled back, 5-10 years ago into a concept, and only now has it matured to the point where we're comfortable sharing this idea with the world. Now give us your money. There you go. Sorry, just joking.
Just kidding.
So now that it's properly released into the world, when you look 5 years from now, or if you even look a year from now, or 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 50 years from now, multiple generations from now, what do you hope? How do you see EXCORE evolving into the future?
I see us evolving into a more efficient and more capable program that can operate and do this anywhere in the Pacific, and not just the Pacific, Indian Ocean, but our focus with Bishop Museum doesn't really include the Atlantic. We're the Museum of Hawaii and the Pacific, and that's where we grew up. Him here on Oahu, me in Marshall Islands, and I see us being, I don't know, maybe it's on a ship. I don't know what's going to happen yet. But what we're going to see, maybe recreate the Cousteau narrative or the idea behind the Cousteau thing, but with more science. That is the goal.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Well, I think we're going to open this up to the audience for a little bit. We have time for a handful of questions. So what we're gonna do is you're gonna, if you have a great question, please raise your hand, and I'm gonna come to you with this mic. So yes, does anyone have a question you'd like to ask our panelists? It's a very rare opportunity. Yes.
Good evening. I was wondering who is currently winning with the most awesome fish.
That's a good
That's
question.
a tough question.
All right, so first of all, do you mean who discovered it or who it's named for? Because I definitely have the winner for who it's named for, because I beat Brian by just like less than a year in discovering what is now named after me, my favorite fish. But you probably got me beat in terms of, he certainly got me beat in terms of number of new species collected. And I think collectively the awesomeness of all of his fish vastly exceeds the collective awesomeness of mine. So I think you win on that one.
I mean, all fish are cool, man.
Yeah, which of my
That's what a
children
winner
is
sounds
more
like.
cool? I can't answer that question. They're all cool. I don't know if it's kind of a dodge, but
So in the exhibit, there's one specific fish, the Paracalinus.
Yes.
So there are species exhibited here tonight that are unknown to science. We're still putting names on them, and I specifically threw them in there as like little Easter eggs for the serious fish nerds.
Yeah, actually, can any of you share any more of those Easter eggs that you wouldn't mind sharing? Because I know there are a bunch of them. I know maybe DeAnne, if you have any Easter eggs you want to share.
One of the things I actually really like is that in the biodiversity, the projections that's happening on the wall that's highlighting biodiversity is a person who regularly makes sure I don't die, which I find highly enjoyable. But also people like Sylvia Earle are featured. But it's not like we're splashing about names of this like phenomenal woman who's done so much for science, but like is participatory in what's going on here. So I think that's kind of cool. So if you're watching the biodiversity and you see some of the divers in the water, one of them Sylvia Earle and one of them's a good friend of mine. So.
I think you need to elaborate on the don't die thing.
All right, so I'm a rock climber, and I climb with this young chap right here who just so happens to be his son. So I start working here. He's like, oh, you climb? My son climbs. My wife used to climb. You should meet my son. I was like, sure. And then I met him, and now we climb 12Ds together. So it's
one of the
kinda
Easter
hard.
eggs she's referring to is my son Owen, who's here, is in one of the videos, and my wife was earlier trying to catch a picture of him standing next to his own video, but apparently didn't work out, so we have to go back there and wait for that sequence of video to come up again.
Amazing. We have a question right here.
What's the most frightening experience you've had that's not equipment related underwater?
I think I know yours. Samoa?
Oh yeah. So I just flew back from Fiji last night. He and I have been going there for years, diving with bull sharks in this specific region called Benga. But we have an ongoing project with NOAA that we've been participating in American Samoa. And until 1980, there was no record of bull sharks in American Samoa. Maybe one account, right? And what we think happened there was the American tuna processing operation sprung up around Ponga Ponga Harbor, and fishing boats were coming from Fiji and New Guinea. And bull sharks, they can go for weeks without food, and they basically followed these boats that were leaking tuna blood or whatever. And we did 2 expeditions to American Samoa in 2023. Yeah, in 2023, we did 2 expeditions before we realized that on every dive, bull sharks were hunting us. And it's different. These bull sharks are different than what you would see in Fiji that are used to divers or anything. The ones in American Samoa, they only associate humans with food. They've never seen a diver before. There's hardly any scuba diving happening there. So last year, we got stalked, right? And so he was up in the boat. Another Bishop Museum guy and our friend Tony Montgomery, we left the bottom from like 80 meters. It's at 250 feet. And we do our first decompression stop, around 150 feet. And I start noticing there's a bull shark like down here. And then like we have to move up 10 feet, and I notice that bull shark's like down there. And then I go up 10 feet, and I notice that bull shark's right here. But he's like, every time I would notice him, he was halving the distance. and I'm looking at my computer, and I'm like, this is a terrible situation. We're drifting on a line offshore under a buoy, basically. Like, there's nothing to hide under. There's nowhere to hide, and this shark is halving the distance every time we see it, and we have 90 minutes till we can get to the boat. Like, and I'm like, this is not good. So I ended up doing something I've never done in any of our dives, which is send up the emergency marker buoy. That means you have a serious problem, and that caused him to jump in the water. And
So I got to describe what I saw. So when we saw that emergency float, it's like he said, it's like, what, you know, we've drilled for it, we know what to do, but it's not supposed to ever actually happen. So I'm thinking, all right, somebody's unconscious, somebody's equipment broke, something, and I go swimming out, snorkeling over to above them so I could see what's going down, and I see all three of them, and I look down, I'm like, what? You all look fine. And Brian does this to me. He goes...
Yeah, there was words too.
Shark. And I didn't see it because apparently what would happen was when the float come up, the skipper turned the engines onto the boat to come over and bring me up close to them. And the sound of the engine sort of startled the shark and it went off. So the shark was gone when I got there. And so what we ended up doing was having the skipper hover over them, just revving the engine, and that helped keep the shark away. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, the funniest part of that is that the skipper of the boat, had a really awesome sound system on there, and he was able to cue up the theme from Jaws and crank it up at full volume. But unfortunately, they couldn't hear it.
Yeah. So, but it worked. Like getting Rich in the water and getting the boat over in some noise. Like I grew up in Micronesia. I've had millions of crazy shark encounters, but specifically these American Samoa bull sharks. And they're big. They're like 12, 13. Yeah, like the girth, the body is that wide. Like
They're called bull sharks for a reason.
They're not as big as great whites, but they're as
fat
as great whites. And it's not a typical reef shark. And when you're in blue water and you have 90 minutes, you don't want
hide.
And nowhere to hide. You don't want these things around. So those kind of things, like specifically that one, and we've got a lot of other crazy stories, but like nothing that involved equipment. That was a pretty good one.
I won't tell mine in detail because we don't have enough time, but mine was waking up while floating towards the surface, which means I had been unconscious right before then, and that was a pretty scary moment, but I won't go into the detail of that. Probably too incriminating.
Later, over there.
All right. Well, it's hard to follow up after those stories. Yes, a few more questions. You have time for a few more questions. Go to you. No.
How deep do you go on your dives?
501 feet.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Our equipment can go deeper than that. Coral reefs kind of start to fade out at around 500 feet. But more significantly, let's see, just to explain this as simply as I can, when you do deep dives like that, you have to decompress. And the deeper you go and the longer you stay down there, the longer the decompression is. But that's not a linear function. So 5 minutes at 300 feet is not that much decompression. 5 minutes at 400 feet is a lot of decompression. 5 minutes at 500 feet, actually, so the longest we'd ever do is maybe 10 or 15 minutes at 500 feet, and that's an 8-hour decompression. Yeah. And so it gets sort of exponentially more challenging because not only do you have to have life support equipment that lasts that long, you have to have an entire backup life support system that lasts that long. At some point, you need to eat.
Not just
and drink.
one, no, but
yeah.
you need enough. You need when you do those kind of dives, and it's like, say it's 2 or 3 of us, you need enough life support for like everybody to get back. Like,
Yeah.
It's like doing a spacewalk, right? You need some
Right.
kind of system.
So 500 feet is a kind of limit for us because that's kind of where the primary coral reef ends and also where the logistics start to get a little bit out of control in terms of being able to pull off these dives. With technology, we can probably extend that down to maybe, we're thinking 200 meters, 670 feet or so. And people dive that deep. It is possible, but those are usually stunt dives. Somebody just bounces down there, touches the sand, comes back up, spends 14, 15, 20 hours decompressing.
Yeah.
That's what those kind
Breaking
of dives are like.
records.
We're down there to do science. We're not down there to touch the sand to come up. We got to spend some time down there. So combinations of technologies will allow us to extend that. And coral reef fishes do inhabit depths down to those depths and probably a little bit deeper, but at some point it changes into a totally different fauna than what we're used to.
Yeah,
Also,
but
it's really cold.
Not as deep as we thought.
That's true. No, yeah, Brian's finding out that actually maybe 300 meters is what we should be aiming at.
I'm finding out that we may have vastly underestimated the amount of diversity just below where we cut off at 500 feet.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm going to say about that for now.
I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of our target limit.
So I have one more question, and there was a question in the very back there that I kind of want to make sure I get to. Was it? Do you remember where it was? Nope. Oh, decompression.
Yeah,
Decompression.
all right, thank you. So just very quickly, when you go underwater, you're breathing gas under pressure. And so at 300 feet, you have 10 times the density of gas in your lungs because you have 10 times the pressure around you. And so that high gas density in your lungs dissolves into your blood and tissues over time. The longer you stay down there, the more of that gas molecules dissolve into your blood. Those gas molecules have to come back out of your body. And one way they can come out is the same way they come out when you shake a soda bottle and pop the top off, in the form of little bubbles. Those little bubbles will happen inside your body. That's happened to me. I was quadriplegic because of that at one point in my life. And so decompression means coming up slowly and allowing time for all those gas molecules that got into your body when you were down deep to slowly come back out of your body. And that's why Brian, when he saw the bull shark in Samoa, was stuck for 90 minutes because his choice 1, face down the bull shark. Choice 2, go up to the boat and become paralyzed from decompression sickness. And so this decompression sickness is really one of the main things that limits our ability to do the dives.
So, okay, we are right at around time. So I do want to ask all of the panelists if you can just share your final thoughts or final messages that you really want people to take away from the exhibition, from your work, anything that we haven't touched upon that is important to make sure that we call attention to before we part ways.
I'll do a little like secret telling. Apparently, if you come back in the future, you might see new content on the walls.
Awesome.
That is true. My final message would be, I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope it inspires you the way what we do inspires us. Like, we're not going to stop finding new stuff. Like, there's a crisis in biodiversity right now, but that doesn't mean you can't explore the planet and find new things. Like, I hope that my boy, Lucas, right there, I'm not going to force him into my footsteps, but like, there's still stuff out there to explore and to find, and like, stay curious. That's the message.
Yeah. I guess I would say that my number one message is do not ever underestimate the importance of biodiversity to our own survival. We are living things. Biodiversity is the totality of all living things on the planet. We are living things on the planet. We are part of biodiversity. Biodiversity depends on us. We depend on it. And I guess I would say, as Brian said, our hope is that this exhibit helps give you a glimpse of why that matters and why it's so amazing, particularly on coral reefs, and why we really, really, really need to protect this stuff, not just because it's pretty to look at, but because we literally depend on it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for gathering here with us to celebrate the opening of this epic exhibition, EXCORE. Now will be the time to get in there and really immerse yourself in it. And Brian, Rich, DeAnne will be around to answer any questions. And I do want to, before we part ways, I do want to just acknowledge and just give a huge shout out to some other ichthyology colleagues who are here with us, who are also have a booth display in the Atrium Hawaiian Hall, which is right behind the exhibit. It's where some of the 2 cameras, Brian, that you brought in specifically for tonight is on display. And also we have some specimens from our ichthyology collection that, and I just want to shout out to Calder Atta, if you could join me in welcoming him and just celebrating his work. And he's going to share a little bit about what he has in the atrium for folks to see.
This will be very quick. So everyone, I just wanted to make sure everyone that knew that table was back there, just because when you walk in, you have this amazing exhibit, but we also we brought out stuff for you guys to see tonight, so you're not going to see that on a normal day. But basically, I'm the collections manager for the fishes here, and I like to tell people I'm kind of like a fish librarian. So while these guys are out doing their research, doing their deep dives, and finding all the cool fishes, I'm basically manning house here, taking care of all the specimens that they're bringing back, all the images and the data and making sure it's accessible and used. And so basically, what Brian was talking about with coming back with all this amazing footage and treating it with, with the respect and the stewardship that you would any museum specimen. That's kind of our job. And so I'll be back in back of the exhibit. Brian will be there with his 2 generations out camera, so you guys can come meet us and you can kind of see some of our material and we can share more a little bit about what we do. So.
And lastly, I want to give a shout out to Cassie Ka'apu Lyons, who's, I don't know if she's here. She might be in the back, but she's been doing incredible work as well, and is also one of the key people behind EXCORE. So with that, please join me in giving another round of applause to our panelists. And thank you so much. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. And yes, celebrating Explore EXCORE. Mahalo nui.